So reserve funds, Section 38 of the Condominium Property Act was replaced. A corporation must establish and maintain a reserve fund that is, and this is the change, reasonably sufficient to provide for major repairs and replacement for the corporation's real property, personal property, common property, and managed property. 4 types of property. Real property is a unit or it's something that is owned, is registered in the corporation's name at land titles. Common property, I think you know. Personal property, think the lawnmower. And the managed property is property that is actually part of a unit, but the corporation has to repair and maintain it pursuant to the bylaws. You frequently see that in the bare land property context. Now, the repairs, when money is paid out of the reserve fund, it must be for repairs that are not occurring annually. Now, capital improvements. Let's understand what is a capital improvement. What is a capital improvement? Now, capital improvements, if money is going to be taken out of the reserve fund for a capital improvement, you need a special resolution. That was the case previously. But it helps to understand what is a capital improvement, because sometimes you see disputes where owners say you can't use that money from the reserve fund because you didn't get a special resolution. Now, there was a case I was involved with, and it was Justice Sanderman. He gave a wonderful example. In the event that you have a 4-story walk-up and they have an elevator, and that elevator needs to be replaced or a major cost to it, is that a capital improvement? No, it is not a capital improvement. You might say, well, that's a capital piece of property. It is not a capital improvement. Well, what is? If the twin to that building, the 4-story walk-up, has stairs without an elevator, and the owners are fed up with going up to the 4th floor and the 3rd floor, and they want to use the reserve fund to put in an elevator, that is a capital improvement. It's something that didn't exist before. If you're going to take money or want to use your reserve fund to put in something that didn't exist before, that is a capital improvement. A capital improvement is not improvements to your capital property. Okay? Are we clear on that? If you're repairing and maintaining your common property, your real property, your personal property, your managed property, you do not need a special resolution from the owners to take the money out for that purpose. If you want to put in something that wasn't there before, yes, you need a special resolution. Now, the regulations in the Act provide further clarity, and this is actually in the Act, as to what is not a capital improvement. And it's now in the Act that states, if you're putting something in that is the modern equivalent to obsolete old property, that's not a capital improvement. Okay? Further, in the event that the addition is required by law, that is not a capital improvement. An example for that might be that there is some work that is required to be done, perhaps under human rights legislation. You've got to put in a wheelchair ramp. Okay? It wasn't there before. Absent the change to the legislation, previously that would have been a capital improvement. Now, it is not deemed to be a capital improvement by the Act, and so the money can come out of the reserve fund for that without a special resolution. So once again, special reserve funds. Money can come out of reserve funds by the board if they're repairing and maintaining common property, real property, personal property, managed property, and it's not a repair that is the type that happens annually. You can take money out for capital improvements, additions, major additions, as long as you have a special resolution. Now, in regards to who can be a reserve fund provider, there's a lengthy list. That's actually the summary list. In our final regulations, they provided a lot more than they had in their first draft. That's the summary list. Read the lengthy version in the regulations. You'll find it between 21 and 30 as to who can do it. The main thing here is that the reserve funds need to be done by somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Okay? Now, specified people who cannot act as a reserve fund provider. You can't have a director do it, an officer do it, an employee of the corporation, the manager of the corporation. It can't be an owner, an occupant, or a spouse, partner, parent, or child of such. They're trying to remove what people refer to as a conflict of interest or material interest, okay? If a contract for the reserve fund was entered into on December 31st or prior, you're under the old rules. So this applies to reserve funds where the contract is signed with the reserve fund provider January 1st onwards. There's some rules as to how developers have to do these. They have to engage someone who's arm's length. And once again, if you've got a small corporation, 12 units or less, the corporation can carry out the function of the reserve fund provider if authorized by special resolution. Okay? Time focus for your reserve funds have been increased from 25 to 30 years. The reserve fund provider must conduct a visual inspection. I bloody hope so. I mean, come on. Some things shouldn't have had to be written down, you know? But this is a change. The reserve fund provider needs to interview the board and possibly the manager if necessary. What they're looking for is that the reserve fund provider is actually seeking information that would be necessary to understand the property that they're focusing upon. The reserve fund provider must actually review relevant documents. That falls back into the I hope so category. The condo plan, construction documents, maintenance records. This shouldn't be just some type of we pulled it out and there's really no thought process into it. Okay? Qualifications of the provider must be stated in the provided reserve fund report. The annual report, there's an annual report under section 29 of the regulations. It must also now include, by the way, that annual report always existed, but now it also includes the forecast amount of the reserve fund projected for the current year, the forecast payments by special or ordinary resolution into or out of the fund, depreciating property to be repaired and replaced with the cost the same. So make a note of that. There's supposed to be an annual report. There's some additional information. Circle back, make sure that you have it in there. Section 29 of the regulations. We segue now into rental deposits. This was an area that in the previous iteration of the regulations, there was some frustration. The frustration was the amount of the rental deposit was capped for longer than 6 months at $250, which elicited a number of lengthy questions to government, most notably, why? Now they've corrected it. Okay, so the maximum amount that can be charged for the rental deposit is $1,000 or 1 month's rent, whichever is greater. $1,000 or 1 month's rent, whichever is greater. So if somebody is renting to their kid, they no longer can say, well, rent was $10. It's $1,000 or whatever is greater. Any rental deposit collected from an owner prior to this section coming into force may be retained in full. So if you had a $1,500 rental deposit and it's before January 1st, you can still maintain it and continue it. Now, I have note the word collected. Again, it's for that last piece, it's for amounts you previously have collected. It's got to be collected, not I issued a notice, but they haven't paid it yet. Otherwise, you're in the $1,000 maximum. If a corporation deducts money from the rental deposit, an itemized list of what was deducted and the purpose of the deduction must be provided to the owner. A rental deposit is confirmed to be a contribution. Under Section 53, Sub 8 of the Act, this means that if you've requested it and they don't provide it and you seek to collect it, then you're going to be able to use the enforcement mechanisms under Section 39 of the Condominium Property Act, just like you would condominium fees or contributions. We now move into borrowing. And if I'm going too fast for anyone, you're welcome. Borrowing is now expressly provided for in the Act and regulations. If you're borrowing or propose to borrow greater than 15% of your revenues, your annual revenues, then that borrowing must be approved by ordinary resolution of the owners. If your bylaws provide that that borrowing has to be by special resolution, you still have to do a special resolution. Here's a question. What happens if your bylaws require that all borrowing has to be done by special resolution or ordinary resolution, and you're under the 15% threshold? Do you still need the resolution? Yes, you do. Okay? So this only applies if there's silence on that. If your bylaws require a higher threshold, a higher standard, be it special resolutions or just generally requiring it, you still have to meet that higher standard. Okay? The resolution to borrow must specify a maximum amount. The board may issue a statement to a lender or prospective lender attesting to maximum permitted borrowing. Now, if the borrowing limit is going to go higher than that amount, you need to go back and get it revised by the owners. Now, once again, refer back to our discussion in regards to the section 20.52, sub 1, sub A documents. The loan disclosure requirements have to be provided to owners. And those are, and again, these are things you can't get wrong. Okay?